Yeah. It's waiting for Sarah to.
On mute, I think.
Oh, Sarah's on mute. Yeah.
Yes, the stream is now live, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, just thank you everybody for coming. And I know it's a very busy time, particularly for members of staff. So we'll try and get through as quickly as we can. I will ask each person present to confirm that they can hear and be heard. This is a legal requirement for virtual meetings. Where practically possible, please also have your videos switched on. So I'll go through the list of members of Forum, and if you can just confirm that you can hear and be heard. So I've got myself, which I can. Kathy's had apologies, Kathy Weston, Christine, Brian, you're here? Yeah.
Yeah, hi, I'm here and I can be heard.
Pat Burbidge, sorry, I'm having problems this morning, Burbidge.
Yes, yeah.
Alex Davis has given apologies. Paul Dineen.
Yes.
Yeah. Nikki Emmett has given apologies. Stephen Fisher.
Yeah, Steve stepped down, Chair. So
Right, okay. Nikki Gilbert's here. Yeah. Can you hear us, Nikki? Yeah.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Ed Gwillam has given apologies. Kimberly Harley
has also given apologies.
Joe Hedges, we can't see you, Joe, but can you hear us? Joe seems to be here, but we can't hear.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, yeah. But I can't see you.
My internet today is really not running well. So if I go to video, I think I lose hearing you.
Okay, that's fine, as long as you can hear us. Yeah. Martin Henton's given apologies. Ali Jackson?
No.
Sue Jenkins is here. Sue, can you hear us? And be
yes, heard? I can see you, and hopefully you can hear me.
Paul Jennings? Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah. Steve Kendrick?
No.
No, not here. Tim Knapp?
No.
No. Tracy Neal? Tracy's here, yeah.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Perfect.
Chris Lerodowski?
Yep, I'm here. I can see you.
Sean Lyons?
Has given apologies this morning.
Rose Lloyd's given apologies. Norman Moon?
He's also given apologies, Chair.
Right. And Rachel Rice, we were going to have a substitute. Is that right?
Yes. So Mr. Edwards is here as her substitute.
Right. Okay. That's fine. We may also have the following officers in attendance, which I don't think we have at the moment, have we? We haven't got Chris Baird's not here. Sarah Buffy Clark is obviously here.
Yes, Chair, and hopefully Chris and or Kerry will be joining us a bit later. They've got an issue to deal with at the moment.
Malcolm Green is our strategic finance manager. Is here and can be heard.
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I'm here and I can hear you. Yep.
Yeah. Les Knight, head of additional needs, I don't think is coming today, is he?
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Oh, you're there, Les. Sorry, I missed you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Les. You crept on there at the bottom.
Yep.
Sorry. And Kerry Morgan, who is our Assistant Director of Education and Development Skills, hopefully will join us later. We also have in attendance Councillor Carol Gandhi, who's the Chair of Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee. Thank you, Carol. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can see and hear you.
But we don't have Councillor Diana Tornby today.
We tend to alternate. When
Okay.
I can't attend, she attends in my place.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. So I just think when we're speaking, I know most of us know each other, but some of us might just not know each other. If you could just, if you asked a question, say which part of the sector you come from, I think it's useful if somebody doesn't know somebody else. So later on, that'd be useful. So thank you, everybody. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel, and the recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, provided it does not disrupt our business of the meeting. I don't think we know we've got anybody else linked in, have we? Well, we don't know that, do we, I suppose. Microphones should be muted unless you're speaking to prevent background noise. When invited to speak, unmute your microphone, and once you have finished, mute it again. Please use the raise hand icon in the participants panel to indicate that you wish to speak. Please remember to lower your hand again after you have spoken. Hopefully myself or Sarah will pick all those up. Where forum members are required to vote on an item, we will conduct an electronic vote, which Sarah has set up. If there are problems with the electronic vote, I will ask each member in turn to indicate verbally if they are for, against, or abstaining. If a forum member has not been present for the whole of the discussion of an item due to a technical failure, they should not vote on that item. So are there any questions about the procedures before we continue, which Sarah Clark can answer, or myself? No hands, so hopefully everybody's happy. So we'll go to the agenda now. And the first agenda item is number 1, is the election of the chairperson. So I call on the nominations for the role of the chairperson to Herefordshire Schools Forum. So Clark, Sarah, would you like to take over that one?
Mr. Dineen's got his hand up, I think. Yep.
Yes.
Julie Cohn, the chair, please.
Thank you for that. Do we have a seconder for that nomination?
I will second that.
Thank you, Mr. Hedges. Are there any other nominations? No, I see no hands. So forum members, the name of the nominated candidate has been added to the poll. It will appear on your screens shortly. You'll have the option to cast your vote either for the nominated candidate, against, or abstain. Please remember to press the submit button once you've cast your vote so that it registers. Anyone who's present who is not a voting member, you will see the voting screen, but you won't be able to vote. So please don't touch anything, and I'll take it down momentarily. The poll should be on your screens now. If you can't see it, there is a polls icon at the bottom of your screen to open it.
I assume I can't vote for myself.
That's correct.
Can see you've changed gender though, Julie, on the...
Oh, yes. Hadn't noticed that.
Typo. Apologies for that, Julie. That's a typo. Right. I have 2 votes outstanding at the moment. Has anyone been unable to cast a vote? Hang on. Okay, make that 1 vote. Right.
I don't see. I haven't got the voting thing on my screen, but
Right. Okay, that's fine. So at the moment, so I've got 9 votes in favour. Obviously, Mrs. Conn can't vote for herself. So, Mr. Jenkins, did you want to indicate your vote verbally if you've not been able to?
yes, I vote for Julie.
Thank you. So that makes unanimously in favour of Mrs. Julie Conn, who is elected as chair for the following year.
Thank you. So I'm just trying to get rid of this. Did it disappear? Sorry, my screen. Okay. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for your support. For those who don't know me, I think everybody does mostly know me, but just in case you don't, I'm Mrs. Julie Cohn. I'm Chair of Governors at Barscourt School, so I represent on the forum as an academy member as a Governor Academy member for special schools. So Sorry, I can't. Can I get rid of the poll off the? Sorry, Sarah. I've got the poll in the middle of everybody, so I can't see anybody at the moment.
Yeah, you should just be able to close that now. Is there a little cross box?
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, everybody. I couldn't see anybody, which was a bit difficult. So I got lost where I've got to. So now on to election of the vice chair. Sorry, we've got the election of the vice chair. So as outgoing chair, I call for nominations the role of the vice chairperson of the Herefordshire Schools Forum. And
Could I nominate Kathy Weston, please?
Can I second that?
Thank you, Tracy. Do we have we've got the seconder, and have we got any other nominations apart from Kathy? Kathy sadly can't be with us today. She's got unable to make this meeting, but she was vice chair last year, so I think most people know her.
Yep.
So shall we do the poll again then?
Yes, Chair. I'll bring that up. The poll should be on your screens now, so if everyone could cast their vote, and obviously, Chair, you are able to vote in this one. Right, so we've had 10 of 11 votes cast, unanimously in favour of Mrs. Weston, and yeah, so that is unanimous for Mrs. Weston now.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Right, so we'll now move on the items, and we obviously Kathy will hope to be with us at the next meeting. So we'll now move on to the next agenda item, which is apologies for absence. And we've gone through the list. Do you want to read those again, Sarah? Or
I can run through them, Chair, just for completeness. So it's quite a longish list today. We've had apologies from Kathy Weston, from Alex Davis, Nikki Emmett, from Ed Gwillam, Kimberly Harley, Martin Henton, Steve Kendrick, Sian Lyons, Rose Lloyd, Norman Moon, and Rachel Rice. So Chris Baird and Kerry Morgan are hoping to be able to attend at some point, but they are dealing with an issue at the moment, so they may be somewhat delayed.
Thank you. And item 4, are there any named substitutes? And we have got one, which you can confirm for us, please.
Yes, so Mr. Trevor Edwards is substituting for Rachel Rice today.
Okay, thank you. Item 5, to receive any declarations of interest by members in respect to the items on the agenda. So are there any declarations of interest? Paul? It's Chris, sorry.
I declare an interest in the trade union dedelegation.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, that's duly noted. And Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to item 6, the minutes of the last meeting held on the 10th of July 2020, to approve and sign these minutes. So are there any matters arising from these minutes which are not dealt with elsewhere on the agenda? Has anybody got any matters arising which have come up?
I propose we accept the minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
I will second that.
Sorry, thank you. Didn't see who that was, but thank you. So we've agreed. Can we all indicate? Can we just put a raise of hands for this one, Sarah? Do we have to?
I do have a poll set up, which should be fairly quick to do. So I'll launch that.
You can please indicate your agreement in the minutes using the poll system as before.
All votes have been cast, Chair. That's unanimously in favour of approving the minutes.
Okay, and thank you very much, and thank you, Sarah. So we're going to move on to item 7, which is the local and national school funding update. This is to seek the views of the forum on the local and national school funding issues, including the recommendations of the budget working group. The following items: the Herefordshire Schools budget, including the schools consultation paper, an update from the Department of Education, and looking at the high needs budget for 21-22. So I'll call upon Malcolm to present to the forum. Paul, you may wish to comment as your chair of budget working group as well. So can I hand over to you, Malcolm, please?
Yeah, thank you, Julie. I have a presentation which I shared with the budget working group at our meeting earlier this month. And what I would propose to do is to run through the main aspects of the budget before asking for comments on the consultation paper. The process is the same as in previous years. The school consultation will be issued immediately after half term following today's meeting. It will close the end of November. We will then work with the budget working group in December and January to bring back proposals for the school budget back to Schools Forum in January, and then we will bring proposals for the high needs budget to Schools Forum in March. Everything is set out in detail in the consultation paper. As in previous years, we will be able to fully fund the national funding formula for schools, and we have choices to make about how to best use the additional funding we receive from the National Growth Fund. Before I go into the detail, can I ask Paul if you'd like to share anything from the budget working group, because I understand you may have to leave late soon-ish.
Yes, thank you, Malcolm. Unfortunately, I do have to go just before 10, so it's nice to have the opportunity to be able to share some thoughts with you at this stage. We had our first meeting at the beginning of October. That was the first meeting we'd had since the 28th of February, so there'd been some time in between the meetings. And Malcolm very clearly outlined the current state of the DSG outrun, in which there was an overspend last year, which has reduced the money that we have available. And something that the budget working group discussed at some length at that point was the issue that we're facing, a very positive issue in some ways, the number of people that are moving into the county and the provision that's available to be able to support those people that are moving into the county. And we can see that this is going to become a bigger concern as we move forward, particularly as it would appear that people want to move into Herefordshire and out of cities at the current time, and understandably so. We then had a really good discussion actually following the presentation, which Malcolm will share with Schools Forum in a moment, whereby we accepted that the principle is very similar to the previous year, that schools will continue to be funded at the national funding formula, and then we have to discuss what we would do with the remaining funds in the schools block. We're well aware that Hash have long argued for ring fencing of those blocks, but that actually Hash does understand the pressure that is there for high needs. Malcolm will share the details with you. I mean, we were in agreement that the proposal that was going forward was right and was just, and look forward to hearing Schools Forum views on that when we then reconsider things later. The Growth Fund was an interesting one. We had a very good presentation from Fairfield High School relating to the Growth Fund. And one of the things that came from the group that we would ask is that the procedures for submitting requests to the Growth Fund was clearer, that we were better able to know what monies were available and how schools could go about applying for those funds. And that's something that we're going to look at again in the future to see if we can work through. And the other interesting one, of course, which I think Malcolm will touch on this morning is the idea of financial transparency, particularly with regard to the related party transactions. And this is something new for the LEA funded schools, but not for academies. And we already have some expertise within the authority as to how we could go about doing that. And we agreed it would be a good idea to seek advice from academies who are already a step ahead on the RPTs. And I think that was all I wanted to share with the group this morning, Malcolm, before you give your presentation. And thank you for the opportunity to share those thoughts. And I'll hand back over to you.
Right, thank you, Paul. I'll just share my presentation on the screen. Right, can everybody see that? Yeah.
Yes, thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I'll go through this then. And to start with schools, I'll do the presentation in sort of blocks of schools, high needs, growth fund, and the financial transparency, and we can have comments after each block, as it will make life simpler. As I've said, it's all set out in the consultation paper. We can fully fund the national funding formula. There is a 3% increase in all the funding formula factors. The teachers' pay grant and the teachers' pension employee contributions grant is going to be rolled into the national funding formula. There is a little query that I have with the DFE in that the way they have done it, it does not automatically provide a minimum for small primary schools of 100 pupils. The current teachers' pay grant and pension grant are funded at 100 minimum for all schools. The way the DFE have done it is that doesn't seem to work accurately. So I have a query with the DFE, and we'll come back to that in December. There's an increase in the minimum per pupil funding levels. Primary schools benefit again to go up to £4,000, and there is a 3% increase to secondary schools, and that is before the amounts for the pension grant and pay grant have been added. There is a significant increase in primary sparsity for very small schools, where the maximum for this current year was 26,000, and that is being increased to 45,000 as a first step, the DFE say, for improving the funding of small rural schools. 12 of our primary schools and 1 secondary school are on the maximum funding of the sparsity. The minimum funding guarantee is set at 2%, so that will provide a minimum funding increase for everybody, including those schools that are currently on the minimum funding guarantee. And in Herefordshire, we have a few, but not many, on the MFG. The proposal that we've discussed with the budget working group, as Paul mentioned, is set out in the consultation paper, and it basically says we'll fully fund the national funding formula. Of the remaining funds that are available, which is about £600,000, I've allocated 240,000 for growth in Golden Valley for secondary schools. Of the remaining, I estimate there's 380,000 that will be available after funding the NFF and growth, and the options are set out on the slide. Option A, which is my preferred option, is to transfer 300,000 to the high needs block and add £10 to pupil for extra pupil funding in schools. The alternatives would be either transfer less money to the high needs block and allocate more to extra pupil funding, and that would have, as a consequence of that, we would have to look at reducing the expenditure on the SEM protection scheme, as the cost of that scheme is increasing. The alternative to that is obviously to allocate it all to the high needs block. So we've gone for a balance of a middle line, some to the high needs block and some extra to schools. These are consultation, out for consultation, and we will come back and discuss those with the budget working group in detail before coming back to forum. But I think that in essence, the budget consultation is about that proposal, since we are fully funding the national funding formula. And as Paul said, it's about what we do with that extra funding that's available, trying to steer away through all the pressures and views that schools and members of forum have. In addition to the financial matters, included in the consultation is a proposal to remove the reception uplift factor. This has been included in our formula since 2014, and it is intended to make an allowance for reception pupils who join schools in January, where they've missed the October census. I mean, for those of you who remember, school funding used to be funded on the January census, and it was moved to the October census. It's not funded by the DFE, as the grant is paid on October pupil numbers only. And out of 150 local authorities, we are only one of 14 that currently continue to use that factor. When the national funding formula comes into play, I don't believe it will be included in the funding formula. So there's a consultation to remove that. It currently costs about £100,000, which is not funded, as I say. The second item is to reduce the clawback percentage from 25% down to 20% on school balances. 25% is very generous, and my concern is that we've had a couple of problems with schools recently who have had really high balances, and they have been loath to make reductions in spending whilst they use up their balances, and then when they're forced into making reductions, it is more of a cliff edge than it needs to be. The average percentage for schools in Herefordshire for local authority schools is 16%, and I don't think there is anybody over 20% at the moment. So this is intended just to scale back the amount that schools can hold. We must remember, of course, that if schools that accumulate really high balances are not actually spending their current budget on their current pupils. So I believe that's a proportionate step. The new rules would apply to balances as at the 31st of March 2022. There is also a consultation included in the paper to revert back to dedelegation for free school meals entitlement because the service level agreement hasn't worked as well as we expected it to. That's all I particularly want to say on school funding. As I say, it's much the same as previous years. I'm happy to take any questions now if anybody wants to raise any issue at the moment. Thank you.
Chair, if I may. Oh, sorry, I'm not.
I think you can put your hand up. Sorry, I didn't see that. I can't see everybody.
Sorry, it's Joe Hedges.
Oh, Joe, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Would you like to?
Thank you. So, as you say, just to introduce you, I'm the primary governor representative. Malcolm, as ever, thank you. A very clear and concise presentation. I don't know how you do it, actually. Just a question. Thank you for flagging, and it is of particular interest to me. Thank you for flagging about this school population being a base at which you're going back to ask questions, the school population of 100. I was just wondering how many schools fall under that threshold in the county?
30 primary schools fall under that threshold. 24 of them benefit significantly from the increase in sparsity. Yeah. So there are 6 primary schools that will lose out. Obviously, some of them have numbers on roll that are very close to 100. and they won't lose much. But I've raised it with the DFE, and I have a solution in mind. But I think the DFE have been slightly misleading in the sense of how they've described the assimilation of the pay and pension grants.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for spotting it and keeping up on it. Thank you very much.
Tracy, I think you want to say something.
Yeah, it's a quick query actually from a couple of colleagues about the growth fund, and I know that somebody said that we're going to be sort of like discussing it later. But how did Fairfield go about actually applying for this? Was it a very public forum? Is it something that the local authorities have approached them with because of numbers? Where does the money come from? Does everybody bid into it? It's just a few queries, really.
Right. Do you want me to take these now or come back to them when I'm going to discuss the growth fund?
Will you be discussing that today, or?
Yes, yeah, it's about 5 slides further on.
I'll wait then, Malcolm.
Yeah, okay. Okay, that's fine, yeah.
Okay, Malcolm, thank you.
Right, okay, we'll move on then.
I've got a question.
Oh,
sorry,
right,
sorry,
okay.
Chris. Sorry, Chris.
Okay.
Right, I'm not sure if this is the right place for the question, but it's as good as anywhere. Obviously, COVID-19 will increase schools' expenditure. Is it possible yet to quantify the additional costs, and what are the longer-term financial risks associated with COVID-19 expenditure in schools?
I think the short answer is no, we haven't quantified any additional costs. The DFE have had in place a scheme in the summer term for schools to bid in for recompense of additional spending on premises factors, premises costs, extra cleaning costs and such. F40 has been sort of quite active in writing to the DFE, pointing out the extra costs, and have written again recently and included sort of requests for the DFE to take account of extra heating costs in winter. And believe it or not, one county said, could the DFE take account of extra cesspit emptying costs because of the increased water and washing hands and things have increased those costs. So the DFE are well aware of the extra costs incurred by schools, and we wait to see what the outcome of any extension of the cost scheme for schools might come from the DFE. Clearly, schools that have higher balances are more able to stand sort of financial shocks and bear the sort of extra costs. But at the moment, I mean, it's a national picture and we wait to hear something from the DFE. The council doesn't really have any extra funds to put into schools. The regulations don't allow us to do so, so we are dependent upon the DFE. So perhaps maybe we could return to the question at the next schools forum, or maybe have a discussion at the budget working group as an item for the budget working group at our next meeting. But it's a very good question, Chris. Thank you.
Right. Surely, although you've talked about premises costs, one of the greatest fears is going to be staffing costs if staff become ill, and you've got to cover them, and those could rocket, couldn't they?
Indeed. I mean, the scheme in the summer that the DF had specifically excluded schools that have lost income from sports halls and things. So, I mean, it's probably more a secondary school issue than a primary school issue, but clearly if you have school facilities that you rent out to the public and the public aren't using them, that could put a big hole in school budgets. So I think we are at the moment, we're in the DFE's hands, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody, I can't see any more hands raised at the moment, Malcolm, so probably good to carry on now, I think.
Right, we'll move on quickly then. Right, Right. High needs growth, the high needs budget. We have been fortunate that the provisional funding allocation that we received gives us £2 million extra in next year's budget. Les Knight and I have spec'd out a provisional budget for 21-22. The key increase in costs are for complex needs places where we've got 1 million and out of county independent places of 500,000. The cost for out of county independent places largely results from our own in-county special schools being full. And it is possible that we might need to go back and sort of juggle the bit of money between the two budget lines. But at the moment, those are our estimations. We've got increased demand at the Hampton Dean language unit. We would very much wish to add an inflationary increase to high needs tariffs. There is the cost of the nurture, full year cost of the nurture groups, which have been sort of progress has been delayed due to COVID, but we fully intend to get on and do that when circumstances allow. We are also looking to add some extra places to the PRU to fund the sort of discretionary placement from help fund the discretionary placements from secondary schools. And again, the PRU has suffered a significant loss in income over the summer term due to sort of lack of trading with schools. Hospital service increase, post-16 places increase, and the costs of the SEM protection scheme increase. So the total expenditure we've identified at the moment is about 2.3 million. We will need to work this through in more detail over the next sort of 3 or 4 months with the budget working group before we produce a finalised budget back to Schools Forum in March.
You got any questions for Malcolm at this point?
Right. I'd just like to say something about the funding gap is 0.3 million, and you'll see that that links back to the schools consultation paper. Last year, Schools Forum agreed a transfer of 0.2 million, and that was to support the extension of the SEM protection scheme to high schools. The SEM protection scheme is rising. And I'll just say a few words about that. The number of pupils with top-ups in mainstream and education healthcare plans is increasing. The number of pupils that were in the SEM protection, the number of pupils went up by 10% between 18-19 and 19-20, and has increased again to date this year. The scheme pays the cost of the £6,000 thresholds to those schools that take more than an average number of high needs pupils. The budget for this year is 385,000, and I expect to spend at that level. Secondary schools are now in the scheme, and although we transferred 100,000 in from to cover the cost from the Schools Block Growth Fund, the cost to date has been 125,000. So all the costs just keep incrementally rising. Next year, we will need to have a cap of £160 and only pay the thresholds above that cap of 160 times the number on roll. My preference, in order to manage the budget and keep it under control, will be to ask Schools Forum to agree a variable cap, say in a range between 160 and 170, that I can then amend during the year to ensure that spend equals budget. And we will discuss the details of that with the budget working group. We are currently forecasting an overspend of about 350k for this year. That includes a complex needs forecast, which is included at overspend of 208k, but that may be much greater, and hence we'll be looking at the forecast again between now and Christmas. The DSG reserves are 630,000. We overspent by £1 million last year, and that reduced the reserves significantly. And it's quite likely that those reserves will continue to obviously reduce towards zero. If at all possible, we wish to keep in a surplus because the DFE impose sort of rigorous constraints and a huge amount of additional work on recovery plans should we slip into any significant deficit. I think that's probably all I want to say on high needs, and I'll come back. I'll take questions now.
So anybody like to ask any questions? I can't see any hands raised at the moment.
I'm not sure whether Les wishes to add anything or not, if he's available.
No, not really. I think that's a good summary of what we've discussed. So I'm quite happy with that, really.
Okay, thank you, Les. Anybody else like to make any? I can't see any hands raised, so shall we move on then? I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. There we go. Right. Golden Valley growth. So the arrangements are for the growth fund. The rules are set by the Department for Education, and the rules are that parental preference is not funded, but planned requirements from the local authority are funded through the growth fund. Now, the growth fund for Herefordshire is new. We had it for the first time last financial year in 1920, and all of the growth fund was allocated to help with either funding the schools block or transferring to the high needs block. For this year, 2021, I had discussions with the education planning team about Kingston, and because we didn't have a very satisfactory process for dealing with this year, we've now taken steps in advance. And the education planning team have advised to me that admissions over PAN will be required for the Golden Valley in September 20 and for future years. And we have agreed an admission of 30 over PAN at Kingstone High School, so that they will take 120 pupils. And we have offered to Fairfield to fund admissions of 10 over PAN at Fairfield. Kingstone governors have agreed with that proposition, and I'm still waiting to hear from Fairfield. This does not mean that the schools cannot take additional numbers over PAN for pupil preference, but it does mean that the council's requirement is limited to 30 over PAN and 10 over PAN at Fairfield to ensure that all the pupils in the Golden Valley get a place. From a financial perspective, I simply respond to the education planning requirements. The growth fund will clearly require 40 pupils at 4,400. The financial year impact differs because it's 5/12 and 7/12 from one financial year to another, because the actual growth funding is done on an academic year basis. And because you have to sort it out in January and the numbers don't actually appear until September, some sort of contingency is required for uncertainty. So that's what we propose for future. We've been very clear, and education planning have advised me that those two schools are the only ones that we need to take over PAN to ensure pupils have a place.
Tracy, do you want to come back at that point?
I've got another slide if I can.
Oh, sorry,
Okay,
sorry,
yep.
sorry, Malcolm.
Right. Tracy asked about arrangements for this year, and as I said, I was made aware of Kingstone High's sort of need to take additional pupils, and that growth was agreed in January and at Schools Forum. I then subsequently became aware that Fairfield have asked for similar growth funding for 33 pupils that they took over PAN. Admissions asked them to do that, and Fairfield agreed. If I had known when I set the budget for that in January at Schools Forum, we would have agreed that growth funding. And so I now, on a fairness basis, I now propose to act as follows: that the growth funding in the next financial year, which is the 512s from April 21 to August 21, will be paid as part of the growth funding from next year's budget, and the growth funding that we would have agreed for September 20 to March 21, we will pay, and that will reduce our reserves by £66,000. The process last year was all very late in the day. It was not very satisfactory, and hence we've acted to be very clear about what the council's expectations are for growth. I'll happily take any questions on that, and I guess Tracy will be first in the list.
Sorry, Malcolm.
Because I'm just struggling to get the pictures on the screen as well. Right. Right, okay.
Sorry, you said there about it being 45 and 33 for Kingston and also Fairfield. So are you actually funding 30 and 10 or 45 and 30?
Right. The arrangements going forward, following advice from the education planning team, are that the council's requirement is to fund 30 at Kingstone and 10 at Fairfield, and that is all we will fund from the growth fund. So if either of those two schools choose to admit more than those numbers, it will be at their own cost.
And that'll be a 1 year cost. It's not going to be a rolling on. From
Well, it will be a roll. It will be a rolling. It will be until the schools fill up to those numbers. So, for example, for Kingstone, what we have effectively done is agreed with the school that the school will expand by 150 pupils over 5 years. And this is also linked back to the capital program, where we are bringing back mothballed accommodation at Kingstone to accommodate these pupils. So looking forward, we have in place an agreement that this is what we're going to do at Kingstone and this is what we're going to do at Fairfield. And I am very clear that the arrangements we have are specific, they're bounded, they're identified, and they will be agreed with the governors, and the admissions team know exactly what the position is for each of those schools. The way we did it for admissions in September 20 was we had discussions about the growth fund with Steve Fisher as head of Kingstone in December. I asked the head to write to Andrew Hind as head of the capital, the education planning team, capital strategy team, and Andrew agreed that 45 additional pupils were required at Kingstone High. At no point did anybody mention to me any discussion about Fairfield. So we went ahead and set the budget on the basis of Andrew's advice, and then subsequently admissions identified that Fairfield were also going to take extra pupils over and above the limit. But it was all so late in the day that it was not possible to change any of the arrangements. So the one lesson I have learned from all of this is we need to be absolutely crystal clear upfront, well in advance, what the proposals for growth funding are. And I rely on the advice that I received from the education planning team. I think that's probably all I can say.
I think Paul would like to say something, Malcolm.
Yeah.
I can unmute myself. Thank you. Yeah, I just been thinking about what I said earlier. I didn't want the comment that came from Budget Working Group to sound like any sort of criticism as to the process that had gone on. This is a very new set of circumstances which Malcolm's had to deal with, and had to deal with very much sort of on the back foot in terms of timing. So I didn't want anybody to think that we were criticising the way that Malcolm had dealt with this. Not at all. It's the fact that I would agree with him and exactly what he said, that we just need to make sure that we have got clarity and that we've got a recognised and acknowledged procedure in place whereby we can look at how and where this funding may need to be applied. Is that a fair comment, Malcolm, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all brand new to us, and in many counties it's a lot easier because they build new schools, and if you're building a new school, the new school isn't funded and it has to grow incrementally. Where you are expanding additional existing schools, I think it is more difficult, and clearly the links between the education planning team and myself, we've never had to have these discussions previously, and now we've put in place arrangements to do so. So I think that going forward, we are on a lot firmer ground as to how this will be done.
Thank you, Malcolm. Would anybody else like to add any comments on this? Or I can't see any hands. So is everybody happy for us, Malcolm, to continue?
And can I just say thank you, Malcolm, for explaining it?
Can I just say something, Julie?
Yes, Paul. Yeah.
I'm just going to say, I mean, I think that the key thing is this seems to be pupil number led, and that you know, where there are sudden, because I mean, there is the influx of people coming into Herefordshire, and of course that does mean that some schools have got more pupils wanting to join them, etc. But I mean, I think where the initial question from Tracy, I think, you know, just it would be helpful to have probably some sort of template key questions so that anybody who feels it is appropriate for them to get more money or funding, you know, will know exactly what questions they have to address, and therefore, and also to understand what the decision-making process would be once those applications have gone in, because there may be some primary schools, for example, that have got numbers coming in that may be thinking, well, perhaps I can access the growth fund. So I think it's a new thing, and the more open and transparent we can be, and having a clearer system, the better. And I think this has just suddenly sort of happened, and I think we know lessons and discussions are happening. So I think you know, to try and do what we can to help the system, really.
Thank you, Paul.
If I could just say one final comment, really. I mean, the growth fund is really to fund the long-term expansion of schools dependent upon pupil planning in a catchment, in a planning area, and so it needs the sort of skills and experience of the education planning team to look at Golden Valley as a whole, look at birth rates and numbers moving from primary schools to secondary schools, as well as people moving into an area, and it's sort of where it's linked to new housing developments, and it's quite a complicated business. And I think we, as you say, we are just getting to grips with it more. But I am very clear that the application process has to be through the education planning team, and it has to be about the council requiring schools to take additional pupils. It is not about pupil preference, and the DFE made that very clear, you know. So I think it is work in hand, and I'm sure we will get better as we do more.
So can I just follow up on that, Julie, and to say that, so am I right in thinking that if there's planning in particular, if you mentioned planning, then there are section agreements, I think, where developers can be asked to contribute towards schemes within areas. So are is funding available, therefore, from those sections? Is it 106 agreements, I think, which will help support schools in those areas as well? So is there additional funding that's coming in that would support schools as well?
Section 106 agreement, Paul, is capital, whereas the growth funding in the school's budget is for the revenue consequences of the additional pupils. But you're quite right to say that clearly, if the council requires schools to take additional pupils, then there has to be capital that goes into building new classrooms, or is the word mothballing old classrooms, you know. So there's a very definite link between required pupil growth and the capital program that all does need to be planned, and it needs to be planned sort of 1 or 2 years ahead so that the capital works can be done before the pupils arrive. But you're right, Section 106 monies is used, and Kingston are going to receive a significant amount of Section 106 money to help with their capital refurbishment.
And it's just whether or not there needs to be a joined up conversation across the piece that all schools are aware of what might be available, or a briefing note to everybody, so everybody's in a sort of transparent, you know, place really, so that everybody knows what can be available, what they need to do, because obviously if you've got Section 106 money, then to provide capital, then that may help some schools.
Yeah, agreed. I will ask Kerry Morgan and Quinton me to sort of develop this through the capital program and let schools know. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Malcolm, I'd just like to add really, my special needs hat on really, was that, and Les probably can confirm this, and Nikki, that along with the growth of input into the county, there is a growth of high needs as well, with people moving into the county, and with the high level of specialist education we have in Herefordshire. And I think that was commented on, and Les, I'm sure you can confirm that there has been an increase of people coming into the county as well, isn't there, with high needs?
Yeah, there probably is a growth of high needs pupils coming into the county, although I would say the major factor in our growth has been pupils moving from mainstream to special from within the county. So
yeah, okay, so it's just probably part of the picture really then.
I think also, if I've done an exercise recently that, with Les's point there, it's impossible to, because we're an all-age school, I've plotted my high school population at the moment, and maybe 12% of them started their life in our school. They started in mainstream. So it's that timing of when they actually become a young person with a special need, and that has been altered based on the expectations of the national curriculum, and having been, they're no longer functioning at where they should be relating to that document. So the planning for the expansion of our type of schools is very, very difficult to do, and as we know, there's actually no physical space for them to expand anymore. So I think that would then impact on the out of county places, because we can't take any more at the moment. Do you agree, Julie?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I know we're going back a little bit to the high needs, but it just could become part of the discussion that, yes, I do. We haven't got any space, as we all know. Yeah. Tracy, I think you wanted to say something else.
Yeah, it was just a quick query, Malcolm, and it's actually my ignorance, I think. How do we know if somewhere like Fairfield is admitting 10 more pupils, that's because that there's a need in the area rather than parental preference?
That is for education planning to determine based on sort of birth rates and pupil numbers in the area. I'm very fortunate to be able to say that is not a financial matter that I need to deal with.
Thanks, Malcolm.
It'll be very interesting about lockdown babies, won't it?
Well, yes, yeah. Yes. Right, okay, I'll move on.
Sorry, yeah.
Right. The DfE ran a consultation about increasing financial transparency for local authority schools. There They proposed 9 new proposals for local authority schools to enact. Many of them are simple things like publishing a link to the CFR financial benchmarking on the school website, requiring schools to produce 3-year budgets. We already require schools in Herefordshire to produce 5-year budgets from their software, and that's a great help to financial planning. They also propose to name and shame local authorities that are late in submitting their returns to the DFE. So many of them we already do, or they are relatively simple. The only significant change which will be new to local authority schools is schools must submit a list of related party transactions to their school financial value standard when they submit it. This will require schools to identify what related party transactions are as they go through the year, and keep a list of it and then submit it back to the local authority. This is further guidance. We are waiting further guidance from the DFE, and after Christmas I will be writing to local authority schools to actually set out how they should do this and what a related party transaction is. A related party transaction is what it says it is. It is a financial transaction with a third party that has close links with the school. So the typical case that the DFE always talk about is business that the school places with the chair of governors company. And that is where, when you look at the press, those are the headlines you will always see. But there are a whole raft of other transactions that the schools need to identify. The DFE's original proposal was that the school should seek the approval of the local authority before entering into a related party transaction of £20,000 or more. But they have rowed back on that and only require schools to publish them. More information to follow after Christmas on this. I think that's probably all I wish to say. Thank you.
Sorry, Tracy, you still had your hand up. Sorry, I didn't notice earlier. Sorry. Oh, it's all right, Tracy. That's why I thought you wanted to. Anybody else would like to make any more comments to Malcolm on his presentation? I think we'll.
It only remains really to ask Schools Forum whether, in the light of the consultation, or the presentation, whether there are any changes they require to the consultation draft that's set out in the agenda papers. So I'm either happy to have comments now, or any comments following the meeting by email would be most welcome. Otherwise, it's you can consider the recommendation, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Does anybody want to make any recommendations for changes at the moment? Or I'll put the recommendation forward. So I can't see anybody at the moment. So I'll put the recommendation as follows: that the Schools Forum have considered the initial budget proposals for the 2021-22 for schools and high needs, and supports the council's annual budget consultation with the schools. So we need to vote on that, please, Sarah.
Sarah, my submit button isn't blue. I can't press it.
Yeah, I've got trouble with my cursor this end as well. Can't see.
Okay.
I don't think I would do on this, would I? Because it's I've got an interest. I think.
No, wouldn't have put any restrictions on you. Okay, so I've got 8 of 11 votes cast, and that's unanimously in favour. So I think we can probably consider that as carried anyway, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. We'll yes, say that has been carried. Okay, we'll now move on to item 8, which is the work programme, which is to review the work programme for 2021 for Schools Forum and then identify any additional needs items the forum wishes to consider. So can I call on the clerk to update the forum, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is our fairly standard work programme now, with the usual pattern of meetings as we've heard previously, to meet in January to agree the school's budget, March essentially for the high needs budget, and then the summer meeting to kind of mop up and look ahead. So it's a fairly standard programme. I don't know if we had any other suggestions of any items that the forum wanted to consider in the coming academic year. I know there was possibly a suggestion around the solid routes projects, Malcolm, whether you wanted to actually put that on the work programme for some point.
Yes, please. I've agreed with the solid routes manager that they'll bring a report to the 19th of March meeting. So that can be included in the work programme.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. That's good. We'll have that item added. Is that okay now? Sarah, fine. That's been added then. So forum members, can I please note the next meetings for this academic year are for the 15th of January 2021, the 19th of March and the 9th of July. I see Chris is now with us. Chris, I think you'd like to make might like just to address us or just add a few comments.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good morning all. Apologies, I was late. Like a number of colleagues, and increasingly so, I was working through a COVID-19 situation, and I just want to pay testimony again to all those working in education who have been educating our children over this past half term and made all those preparations and continued to work in unprecedented times actually throughout most of this year, really. And we do recognise how much additional work and pressure is on our schools and our school leaders and all staff, teachers and non-teaching staff. And thank you all for your continued leadership and work on that. We have had increasing numbers of schools dealing with incidents, and they've been dealt with really appropriately and well, using the local outbreak group and colleagues' support. And I realise going into half term, there is a bit of a break. Just to plead to everyone on the call to let the council colleagues know emergency contact numbers, and also if you can have your bubble information to hand, make sure your senior leadership does have that to hand outside of the school during half term as well, because there may well be a need to contact some pupils outside of obviously the school regular days, and public health team would like to be able to do that if that's necessary. A general message is going out to schools about that, just to confirm that, but I thought I'd use this opportunity as well. But yeah, thank you colleagues for all you're doing, and obviously thanks to those who aren't at Schools Forum, but it gives me an opportunity just to recognise all the work and dedication that is going on during this time. So thank you, Chair.
Paul, like to make a comment?
I take the opportunity, Judy, of thanking you for chairing this meeting. I think that, you know, the budget, it has, I think Chris Lewandowski alluded earlier, there's obviously, with regard to COVID, we yet to quantify costs, etc. But I did want to take the opportunity of thanking Chris and Kerry and the public health team and all the health and safety people at the local authority, and Malcolm and Sarah, you know, providing all the information we've received today, because obviously, you know, life does go on. We've got to do what we can to help and support the schools and the teachers and the pupils and supporting parents, etc. And you know, this is one way we're able to do it through this forum and the funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That's greatly appreciated. I know as governors, and I know my fellow governors are here, we appreciate the very difficult situation our staff are in at the moment, and particularly the increased workload. I know at Chair's briefing that was greatly acknowledged the other day. So, and thank you to the staff which are here and everybody else. And again, can we thank Chris and Kerry and the teams and Les for all the work they are doing around this difficult situation. Would anybody else like to make a quick comment? No. I know as the meeting has gone on length, but I think we have had the opportunity to have a good discussion, which I think is very good. So I'd like to close this meeting, and Clark, Sarah, please can I have confirmation that the live stream has been stopped?